Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you, stalwarts, to the second in our series of legislation trainings this January. I'm calling you stalwarts because we have a huge number of people who signed up, and I think most people want the recording. So it's really wonderful to have you all here because you can react in real time and ask questions that will help everyone. So I'm Janet Cox. I lead Climate Action California. We're an all volunteer group that works out science based solutions to the climate crisis and advocate for those in Sacramento. Um, we have a lot of really active volunteers, and we'll be happy to welcome any of you who are meeting us for the first time. Hopefully by the end of tonight, you'll all feel like you're ready to meet with your legislators. And if you heard part one last week, or when you get the video that we'll be sending to everyone, you'll learn more about how the legislature works. So I want to start out by introducing Kathy Schaefer who works with Climate Action California and also Climate Reality Project, which is one of the co-sponsors for this event. Please say hi, Kathy.
Hi, thank you, Janet. If you were listening last week, you know all about climate reality, but I'll give you the short version again. Climate Reality Project was founded by former Vice President Al Gore, and he started off training people in 2006. And over the years, he's traveled around the world and has trained hundreds of thousands of people. And all of those people have gone out to train people in their own communities. There are 9 Climate Reality Project chapters in California and lots and lots of chapters across the country. And we're happy to be working in collaboration with Climate Action California.
Thanks, Kathy. Third Act SoCal is also co-sponsoring this training. Phil Glosserman couldn't be with us tonight, but we're really happy to be collaborating with Third Act. This is not the first training we have done with them. We're going to get right to the presentation, but I just want to explain that I think the best way to deal with your questions is to hold them until the end, unless you have clarifying questions. Sort of mark those in the chat. Please feel free to put all of your questions in the chat. Linda Hutchins Knowles, our volunteer coordinator, is going to be curating questions and flagging clarifying questions that might help on the way through. But I think mostly hold your questions till the end, but we do want to be sure everybody understands what's happening. So I want to turn it over to Mary Buxton, a longtime volunteer with Climate Action California who has probably the best social skills in the room, which makes her really good at what she's going to be telling you about. But over to Mary. Thank you.
Next slide, please. Thanks, Janet. I appreciate that. So I've been with Climate Action for maybe coming up on 10 years. It's amazing to me that because it seems like it was yesterday that I started. And currently, I'm a co-lead of the capital teams for the natural resources sector, which I will talk more about later. I live in Los Gatos, which is in Silicon Valley. But as you probably all know, we are statewide now. And so we talk to legislators all over the state. Okay, so effective citizen lobbying is what I'm going to talk about. And engaging with your legislator is much easier than you think. It's also a lot of fun, and it is a constant learning curve. It's really essential that we speak up and form relationships with our representatives because that helps us get the climate and environmental outcomes that we all want and deserve. And through this presentation, we'll be talking about how you can more effectively engage both as an individual volunteer and as part of a group. Next slide, please. Okay, so first of all, why lobby? Lobbying, the word, has a bad reputation and bad connotations for a lot of people because it's associated with buying influence. But the kind of lobbying we do is citizen lobbying, where we're passionate about a cause and we advocate for it, and we want to get good results for ourselves and our communities. And so when we lobby, we are really trying to influence and promote specific bills that we're really interested in. So the most important thing, I guess the word rather than buying influence, for us, the most important word is relationships. And it's really important to get in there and build and maintain positive relationships. It takes time and you have to keep at it. But the goal is to become a trusted resource and partner with your legislators. And being polite, authentic, listening, communicating with positivity and respect all help develop this. And the other thing we do quite a bit of is educate, because education can be very motivating for everybody, actually. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so why is it important to make our case? Uh, In general, every year, somewhere around 2,500 bills are introduced into the legislature, the Senate, and the Assembly. And our job in the realm of climate is to be experts, that we would have connection with other advocacy groups, do deep dives into the issue, and we could tell the legislators stuff that they don't know about and provide a different perspective. And a lot of times in meetings, they go, I'm not that clear on that bill. So that's a great opening to educate. And the issue is, if we aren't out there talking and developing relationships, the people they hear from are the paid for lobbyists by the oil and gas industry. And so they're going to be really influenced by them. And what we want to do is give a whole different perspective and also provide that link to the citizens that they are supposed to be representing. Next slide, please. So there are differences between being a paid lobbyist and a citizen lobbyist. Well, first of all, paid lobbyists get a paycheck. We don't. Um, they can bring in campaign cash through fundraisers and donors. They usually are super organized with a single clear objective message, and they are often in the Capitol. Citizen lobbyists, which is where we would fall, the column we'd fall under, are volunteers. They bring grassroots support. So sometimes we have, I don't know if it's 200 signatures or 200 organizations on some of these letters of support that we organize. So that is a lot of grassroots support for that legislator. And we sometimes have more than one objective, although fewer is better. And I used to say that the work we do is often in the district, and it was when I first started out, except for lobby days. But now that last year, Will Brieger came up with this idea of doing capital teams where we have people. I'm actually more in the district and I meet with the district staff and the legislator in the district office. But we have people up in Sacramento on 3 different teams for natural resource, energy, and transportation. And they can go to hearings and do Me Too's or provide testimony, expert testimony. They can go to offices and develop those relationships up in Sacramento. So this is a really exciting development. And it also, I want to bring up a point about have an anxiety about doing this is last year when they said, "Do you want to co-lead this team?" And there was like no model of how to do the team. We just cooked it up as we went along, and Amanda and Linda were working on all the support Google stuff and everything, and now it works so well. And but you just have to jump in and try. And that's what I love about this organization is that there's not a lot of well, actually, you don't get criticized, but you get a ton of support and help when you need it. Okay, next slide, please. So you can advocate as an individual or as part of a group. And whatever you're doing, you're trying to cultivate relationships with the legislators and their staff. And you can attend events with legislators and staff. For instance, last fall, my assembly member does hike a trail with Gail or wag a tail with Gail, which is where you meet at a dog park. But anyway, it's very fun. And then I also went to one of her campaign events, made a donation, and so I got a personal Christmas card. So this is all this relationship building, and it's very enjoyable because they're just really interesting, usually very smart people. So it's good company. Um, Always be grateful and thank them for their work. There are things we can do, signing petitions, writing letters to the editor. There's a lot you can do as an individual. You can make calls, send emails, um, on some of the issues. I took over doing a letter campaign, trying to get letters to the editor placed in a lot of just different newspapers around the state on an issue that was of utmost importance for me related to CEQA. Um, and then we have a lot of meetings with legislators and with their staff, and most of them happen over Zoom. So you can join that way and participate as an individual. Can we have the next slide, please? And then advocating as part of a group, I just wanted to say that I think there is a wonderful esprit de corps at Climate Action that people like each other, they learn from each other, they're supportive. It's really, for an large, we're getting pretty big, I think. So it's just kind of really nice atmosphere and it makes you want to do the work and support other people in what they're doing. So we meet regularly as, when we have reasons to meet with them, with legislators. Recently, what I did, sometimes I take gifts when I go. There's a book called the Enduring Wild, and it's about the BLM lands in California. And I love this book. So the last two legislators I met with, I took them each a copy of the book and just said, here's from Climate Action California. You love the environment. Here's a really good book on the environment. Um, we strategize with the staff in meetings, and sometimes, when we say, how can we help you? They have things that they do want us to help them with, which is really, very fun to be able to participate. We can generate calls and letters from constituents. I mentioned all the different right position letters, speaking at hearings, op-eds, petitions. Just there's a lot of different tools that we can use to be part of, to participate as a group. Next slide, please. And guidelines for group work. You're representing the group, not yourself. I had some issues early on where I would plan the meeting and get everybody organized, and then somebody would kind of hijack the meeting and take it over for their purpose. And I didn't quite know how to manage that. I think I'd be better at managing it now, but the goal is to work as a group and work as a team in coordination with one another and to have mutual respect and support. And particularly often environmental justice because those are they represent frontline communities who often end up with lots of injustice, that to really pay attention and, if possible, raise them up and deal with their needs first. Um, so to agree on a consistent message, and usually Climate Action California meets in advance of meetings to plan who's doing what, who's saying what, and then we just stick to that and it goes really well. Next slide. And so the big deal about this lobbying is relationships, relationships, relationships. And our goal is to pass important climate legislation now and in the future. And so having good relationships means you'll have future access. And in fact, I worked really hard on one issue when I first started. And I went to this one legislator's office probably 8 times with groups of people. And at the end of once the bill finally passed, I said, "Wow, Aditi, you have been so welcoming and nice." And she said, "Well, you're polite, you're organized, you know what I mean?" And so it was like, all that being organized and being positive really paid off. That the door was always open whenever I called. I never was put off. Um, and sometimes people think it's the sort of a lesser thing to meet with staff members, but meeting with the people that staff particular issues, say environment and climate, they have deep knowledge. They can really have the time to talk with you and are usually very good communicators to pass your message on to the legislator. And so welcome any of these meetings. And so they're good, conduits for information and really good resources. And the last thing is to not be afraid to meet with legislators who don't share your views, because you can always fall back on being interested and listening and learning. And it's maybe an opportunity when you do that to find common ground and educate the legislator, or just give them a different point of view that they may not have heard before. So that's the end of my part on the lobbying and the as an individual and as a group. And now I would like to move to the next slide and hand things over to Kathy Schaefer.
Thank you, Mary. I'm Kathy Schaefer. I do legislative work with Climate Action California and Climate Reality Project, the California State Coalition. And 10 years ago, who knew that we would be doing this kind of work? And glad to be doing it. It's interesting and actually really fun. And I'm going to be talking about the nuts and bolts of how to get meetings and organize them. Next slide, please. As Mary talked about, relationships are what it's all about. It takes time, it takes work, but we can make it meaningful by having a plan. We do our research. We know what we want to accomplish. Having goals are incredibly important. We want to know the purpose of our meetings. Do we want to have a meet and greet? Do we want to, target those new legislators, or do we want to go into a meeting to talk about specific legislation? Or in some cases, CAC will have bills to propose. We definitely want to discuss our common goals and our differences. When we go into a meeting, what are we supporting? What are we opposing? How can we help if we're supporting? And if we're opposing, why are we opposing, and what might make the bill better? This is probably not going to be the end of the conversation. We are going to continue on the important bills that we're supporting or opposing, and work very hard on our priority bills in many ways, with follow-up meetings and all kinds of actions. It is so important to advocate. Every single one of us is important in the process. And part of advocating is listening. We need to listen, we need to ask questions, and we need to provide perspective. It's something that morphs over time, that you learn your voice and not just parrot talking points? Will you learn from each other for that deeper knowledge so that it gives you a better perspective and a deeper understanding to have real conversations? We always want to keep it professional. And like Mary said, we don't always agree, but we can definitely agree to disagree. Next slide, please. So who are the players? Who should we meet with? And how does that work? So it would be great to meet with the actual assemblyman or assembly member, I should say, or a senator every time. That doesn't always work, and it's actually not always the best or most important contact. If we're meeting with the assembly member or senator, we have to be sure that we're asking open-ended questions and let them talk. These are typically super short meetings, 15 to 20 minutes, and they like talking. And we let them talk, and we ask clarifying questions, and we expand the conversation by trying to tie our interests into their presentations. The next person that we like to connect with is the Chief of Staff. The Chief of Staff has the best access to the legislator. They don't always come to meetings because they're super busy, but they do have the best overview of the legislators' operations and priorities, and they will respond at times. The legislative director is the person who's typically the most accessible for us, the ledge director or a ledge aide. These people keep up with the specific bills as they're introduced. They know what the status is. They are really good at giving us updates and information on strategy. They also tell us who we should be reaching out to get support from other legislators or advocacy groups. And they just give us lots of information that we can share. I think one of the people who is the most important in the legislator's office is the person who is staffing the bill. This is typically a legislative assistant, and what happens is these ledge aides get assigned bills to track as they go through the session. And the people who staff the bill are responsible for however many bills they have. They know their bills inside and out. They know every little bit of word of them. They know the deadlines. They can tell you what committees that the bill will be heard in. And when the bill might be heard in committee, they can give us kind of a preview of when something might be scheduled. So these are really very accessible people. And oh, the most important part, there is something called a one-page fact sheet. And these staffers write the fact sheets and will give them to us. And they are loaded with lots of information about the legislation in plain English. So it's very hard to read legislative language. So we love when the staffer will email us a fact sheet. Always ask for one if you are doing some research. The most interesting things, well, for me, but probably for a lot of us, we love meeting with the policy analysts and the consultants who work for the various committees or departments within the legislature. These are among the smartest people in the Capitol. They have deep knowledge of so many different issues and know how the legislation works. People like us who do a lot of work with the legislature, it's hard to know the rules of everything and how things work, but these people know their stuff. And the good news is they're really accessible. They love sharing information. And we've had some really interesting and important meetings, I think, especially about things like the budget, which is so complex. We've had good conversations. The next person, who is one of my personal favorites, is the scheduler. This is the person who will give you access, and we are always kind and polite to the scheduler. It's interesting how the triangle of influence inverts when you need to get a meeting. Um, anyway, with any of these people in the legislative offices, if they know you or your organization, it is so much easier to get access. And this happens over time. We can now be in a place where informal, occasional contacts are really important. Well, if we have questions, we'll email the legislative director and say, hey, what's happening this week? Or we can call the scheduler and say, we asked for a meeting, are we on your list? Just keeping in contact is super important. And like Mary said, I'm not going to belabor it, but we really need to meet with people that don't agree with us. We've had some really interesting conversations with people who are completely opposite of us, but we are building relationships, we are educating, and guess what? We are learning from them about their perspective so we know how to approach our issues. We're never going to change everybody's mind, but we can try to make a little bit of headway. When do we meet? We would like to meet early in the legislative session. We want to do that so we can kind of set the groundwork and influence somebody later on. It's also a good time to ask broader questions before they've decided what bills they are definitely going to introduce. So we can talk to them about their ideas and talk about our priorities. And now I'm ready to go to the next slide. Thank you. And how do we make these appointments? Definitely call the Sacramento office. The people in the district office don't make those appointments. If you know the legislative director, it's possible to email directly to set up a meeting. They may refer you to the leg aide, and that's fine too. It's easier if we can avoid going through the formal scheduling process if possible. So we always try on the phone first or email. Most of the time, the scheduler will tell us what to do. Each office seems to have a little bit of different procedures, but most of the time we'll be filling out a scheduling request form online, and they tell us how to do that. They always want to know who we are, what groups we're affiliated with, and what the purpose of the meeting is. Sometimes you need to be a little bit of a squeaky wheel. They don't sometimes get back to you, and it's really okay to call and say, I put in a request. Can you give me an update? And they're very good about that, and they'll follow through. Once we have a firm date, we will figure out our logistics. We'll confirm our Zoom, we'll invite our people, we will schedule our planning meeting, and then work on the agenda. Next slide. It is important to know your legislator's background before your meeting, who they are, where they're coming from. Same thing for the staffers. We'll look at their LinkedIn pages, or we'll Google people. We can get a lot of information by looking at the assembly member or senator websites and other resources like Ballotpedia or LegInfo. And then there are always the environmental report cards from groups like Sierra Club or California Environmental Voters. The demographics are very important. We need to know the socioeconomic, ethnic backgrounds, the type of district, whether it's rural or urban or coastal or inland, those kinds of things. And we always want to check and see what are the hot button issues in any of these districts. We look at the legislative record. What kinds of bills does this senator or this assembly member author or co-author? Have they ever even introduced an environmental bill? What is their voting record on the climate or environment? And what are their specific areas of interest? They all have certain little interests that they tend to focus on. Another important thing is the committee assignments. What committees they sit on and who the chair is very important. The committee chair is a very powerful position. They can do things like choose not to hear a bill in their committee. They can make amendments. They can recommend amendments, just how they address the conversation in committee will show if they are leaning in support of a certain bill or are opposed to it. So the chair really can inform how things go in the committee. And the last thing is, who are their influencers or financial backers? Is it an advocacy group like us, or is it the Western States Petroleum Association? So knowing who their backers are is very important. Next slide, please. Okay, last bit here. These meetings don't just happen. It takes quite a bit of thought and organization to have a successful meeting. It definitely gets easier as you do it. If you sign up to attend a meeting with the legislator, you will most likely be asked to attend a pre-meeting so you can be part of the planning. Of course, it's not mandatory if you would like to just observe, and that is perfectly okay too. At the pre-meeting, we will talk about, again, our objectives. What do we want to cover? What are our goals? We'll create an agenda and develop our priorities and our key questions. And then we identify those people who will ask the questions or make the comments as time permits. Because we do have limited time in these meetings, typically they're about a half hour, we need to make sure that we're always just moving through the agenda and that we just stay on track. But sometimes things go off and there's a different flow that we aren't in control of because the legislator or the ledge director might take it in a different direction, and that's okay. We need to be flexible. We need to balance that staying on track, and at the same time, we want to try not to go down too many of those rabbit holes. Active listeners are super important. And we like to have lots of people in our meetings. It really says a lot when we have constituents and people from across the state in these meetings. And we always learn something new. I have never been in a meeting where I didn't learn something. And that's what's so interesting about it. Next slide, please. So, last bit here, to make your meeting successful, these are common sense things that if you've been in meetings before, you know these rules. We are going to check the time, make sure we are not going to run over. We want to make sure we know how much time we have to spend. The facilitator will, backing up, we want to make sure that if we have a giant group, we're not going to introduce every single person because we don't want to waste all that conversation time. The facilitator will set the tone and start the conversation. And again, we have an agenda, but we need to be flexible. We'll share our information, we'll ask follow-up questions, and we always ask, what are your interests as you, the legislator, what are your interests and how can we help you? And that's what it's all about. And then when the legislator or the ledge aide or whoever we're meeting with leaves the meeting, you all need to stay on the Zoom because that's the best conversation we have. It's so interesting to hear different perspectives of how it went, what we all learned, and what our next steps are. And then when you close down that Zoom, you write a nice thank you note summarizing the meeting, and all done. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan.
Thanks, Kathy. Hi, I'm Jonathan Cole. I am on the transportation team with Climate Action California. Been with Climate Action California about 2 years. I'm based in San Francisco, but today I happen to be in a hotel in Los Angeles. And so Mary talks about citizen lobbying. Kathy talked about meeting with legislatures. I'm going to talk about how we work with committees. So next slide, please. So just a quick overview. In the first session, Janet gave a really good overview of the legislative calendar and how all this works. But just a quick reminder, the whole idea of how a bill becomes a law in California. Bill is introduced either in the Assembly or the legislature. And I'll just to make it concrete, let's assume it's introduced in the Senate. It then goes to the Rules Committee, which decides which committees should actually hear the bill. Just to give a concrete example, a bill I worked with last year was SB 30, which was to prohibit transfer of decommissioned diesel locomotives. SB 30 sponsored by Dave Cortese, who's chair of the Transportation Committee. So he introduced the bill. It was decided that in the Senate, that bill should go to transportation and environmental quality. So it went through both of those committees. Then there is a special committee called appropriations, where any bill with fiscal impacts over a certain limit, which is 50,000 in the Senate and 150,000 in the House, any of those bills go to appropriations. So it goes into appropriations, which is kind of a black box. You never know exactly what's going to come out. The whole idea is that bills with fiscal impact should all be looked at together so you get a sense of the total fiscal impact. In practice, it's a way for bills to kind of disappear and never be heard from again or make it through. So SB 30, after going through transportation and environmental quality, went to the Appropriations Committee, came out, goes to the Senate floor. There's a vote on the Senate floor by all of the senators. Then it moves over to the other house. So in this case, it started in the Senate. Now it moves to the Assembly. Again, hearings in the Assembly. It was assigned to the Assembly Transportation Committee. Transportation heard it, passed it. It then went to Appropriations, was released from Appropriations for a vote on the Assembly floor. The Assembly voted on it. And because it had been amended by the Assembly Transportation Committee, it had to go back to the Senate. So at the final floor session of the Senate, it was heard again, passed with the amendments. Then it goes to the governor, and in this case, we were lucky, and it was actually signed and became a law. But the key feature here is that a lot of the work is done in the committees. You've got committee hearings in both houses. So it's the role of committees is really crucial. Next slide, please. And as Kathy was mentioning, the committee chair is has a very powerful role with bills. The committee chair can decide, basically say, we're not going to hear your bill unless the committee chair works with the committee staff on the bill analysis. And the bill analysis is a document that everyone on the committee gets. Quite often, the bill analysis will say, we suggest that you amend the bill, and the author may consider these amendments. What it usually means is you'd better accept these amendments or the bill is not going to pass through the committee. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. Committee chair is very powerful in determining what bills are going to be heard and whether they might be amended. With SB 30, both at environmental quality and then again at the Assembly Transportation Committee, there were significant amendments, which unfortunately weakened the bill from our perspective. But this is just very common in the way that bills proceed through the committees. Next slide. So the key committees that we work with, bills can go to almost any committee, but the key committees, and this was covered also in the first training session, we've got in the Senate, Energy, Utilities, and Communications, Environmental Quality, Natural Resources and Water, Transportation, and then again, I was mentioning Appropriations. It, as was mentioned last time, because we have a new President Pro Tem of the Senate, she's appointed new chairs for a couple of the committees. So we've listed for Energy, Utilities, and Communications, for Natural Resources and Water, and for Appropriations, new chairs have been appointed to those committees. So those are folks that we're going to be developing relationships with, or in some cases, like Ben Allen and Josh Becker, Climate Action California already has a pretty strong relationship with those legislators. In the Assembly, we still have the same president of the Assembly, Rivas, who we just heard since the last meeting has made some changes, but not in the chairs of any of our key committees. The only chair change was education, which is not one of our key committees. But we work closely with these and other committees. Bills can be assigned to any committee depending on what the subject matter is. We've had bills that have gone, for example, to local government committee. Next slide. So as Mary mentioned, we have this new initiative started last year, the Capital Team. So the Capital Team is a really important piece of Climate Action California's efforts to influence legislation, and they're sort of our arm, our citizens lobbying arm. They work closely with the policy teams to support legislation. They meet with legislators and staff, and they've tracked that legislation through the committee process. And we've talked some already about how some of these meetings go. The Capital Team is specifically focusing on work in Sacramento in the legislators' offices. Next slide, please. So we have three primary focus areas we're working on right now, which are energy, natural resources, and transportation. And those line up with the key committees that I mentioned in the previous slide. We also, Capital Teams also do lobbying in other areas. We're looking at a bill this year, for example, on sulfuryl fluoride, which is a short-lived climate pollutant. This is used in fumigation, and it has a very high global warming potential. And so we're trying to get that added to the list of regulated greenhouse gases in California. And so there's several different areas we look at, but these are the three key. Next slide. Just to kind of get a sense of how this works, we have these policy teams, which Climate Action California has had for quite some time. Within that team, there are members who are very knowledgeable on policy, kind of policy wonks, and they really focus on the policy, the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts. Some members tend more towards advocacy, supporting the bills, and the Capital Team kind of coordinates and brings together these members who are especially focused on advocacy in these key areas, and coordinates efforts especially in Sacramento. Next slide, please. So Capital Team members, a lot of the members are in or near Sacramento, which means they can actually go to the Capitol. They can meet with legislators and staff in their offices. They can schmooze around. They basically become known figures. Will Brieger, who is the leader of the Capital Team, is very, very skilled at this. And so we're all kind of learning, following around with him. And our members are being trained, and we've got folks like Mary, for example, who's working with the Natural Resources Capital Team. We do also, as showing up in the chat, we have other policy teams. The three policy teams I showed are the ones that are sort of our initial key teams for the initial rollout of the Capital Teams, but we have a wide range of policy teams in other areas as well. So folks who are in Sacramento can actually meet with the legislators and staff in their Capitol offices. It's useful also to have folks on the Capitol Team who are not in Sacramento. If you're a constituent of a key legislator, if you live in their district, or you can serve as logistical support and backup for members in Sacramento. And all the folks on Capitol Teams are also members of at least one of the policy teams. And they develop relationships using some of the techniques that Kathy and Mary have been talking about to build relationships. As everyone's saying, this is all about the relationships. And we're looking at key committees, especially chairs, but also other members. Also talking to other lobbyists. You can learn a lot by talking to lobbyists, even those who are on the other side of some of the bills. You can find a lot about what's going on behind the scenes. And because the members are in Sacramento, some of the members in Sacramento, they can actually attend the committee hearings and deliver in person what we call Me Too testimony, which we'll be talking about in just a little bit here. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit more about how we communicate with committees. Next slide. There's a lot of ways you can communicate. As Mary was describing, you can communicate as an individual, just on your own initiative. This is a bill that I care about. I want my legislator to hear about this. It's especially helpful if you are a constituent of that legislator, but it can also be a key legislator on a committee that you just want to hear your opinion. You can send your own email. the best way to do that is usually to find the legislator's website, and that's either senate.ca.gov or assembly.ca.gov. Find out who your legislator is, find out what the bills are. The best way to find out who's on what committees and what committees are hearing the bills is through the website LegInfo. And Amanda gave a really great overview of LegInfo and how that works in the last week's training. So if you haven't seen that, the recording should be out soon. And it'd be a really good idea to review that, how LegInfo works, because it keeps track of what bills are in what committees, what the current status is, what the votes in previous committees have been. So you can really keep track of that. So you can do this just on your own initiative. If you're part of an organization, you might get an email action alert from your organization saying, hey, send the message to these key legislators about this particular issue. And that can make a real difference, either if your arguments are extremely persuasive or just the sheer volume of emails that they might get on a particular message. That can have a big influence on how legislators act. Next slide. I'm going to focus more, though, on communicating with committees as part of an organization. And so there's a lot of ways you can communicate with committees. You can have phone calls or meetings with the committee staff. In addition to the legislative staff for each legislator that Kathy talked about, there's also staff who are staffing the committees. They're the ones who write the bill analysis. And as Kathy was mentioning, they're very knowledgeable about the bills, and they're usually reasonably accessible so that you can find out more information, exchange views, and make particular points that you think they should be aware of. You can have calls, meetings, or office visits with members of the committee, as Kathy was describing. And this can be a formal scheduled meeting. Sometimes on the Capitol teams, members of the Capitol team will just drop by the office and see who's in the office, say, hey, we wanted to drop by. Is there anyone who can talk to us about this particular bill? There's also written communication. Quite often, Climate Action California will sign on to letters from other organizations. So some organization will put together a letter setting forward their position, either support or opposition of a particular bill. And they will say, hey, we'd like to get other organizations to sign on. So you can sign up to those, or you can submit your own position letters. And we'll talk more about what a position letter is in just a minute. Next slide, please. So, sign-on letters. Typically, these happen for legislation that's got kind of a broad impact. A lot of organizations are interested in this, either supporting or opposing. And these sign-on letters get distributed among members. There are formal coalitions. Climate Action California has formal coalition partners that we work with. There's also informal groups that get together on particular bills that are of interest to the members of that organization. And these sign-on letters, someone has drafted and written this letter, or your organization can draft their own and then circulate that for other groups to sign on. And if you agree with the position, if you agree with the argument, then you would sign on. Quite often, you can also put logos for your different organizations. So sometimes this can show up looking sort of like what's called a NASCAR letter. Next slide, please. So this is a kind of an extreme example, but it shows you could have a lot of organizations behind this. And this can have an impact if members of a committee or the committee staff, you see a letter and you see just all of the logos of all these organizations with the signatures of all the leaders who are saying, this is our position, these are our arguments on this particular bill. Next slide, please. So position letter, if you're writing your own position letters are a very important way to communicate with committees. So this is relating to a specific bill, and it's a way to put your organization's position on the record. So when the committee staff prepares the bill analysis, at a minimum, your group's name is going to be listed in support or opposition. If you make really strong arguments, good points, some of that can get into, and we've had that happen with Climate Action California. some of the analysis arguments actually get incorporated by committee staff into the bill analysis that then goes to all the legislators on the committee. So these can be a really powerful way of stating your position and putting forward your argument. And by the way, you can, as an individual, submit a position letter. So you can submit, either an organization can submit or an individual. And Amanda went through at the last training session how you would actually go to the position letter portal and submit a letter. Position letters basically are kind of specific for a particular committee. You're writing, we support this bill, or we oppose this bill, and we urge this committee to vote for or against that bill. Usually, the bill will be amended before it goes on to the next committee, or before it goes to the floor, or before it goes to the other house. So whenever it's amended, you want to update it and make sure your bill says, we are supporting the bill as amended on such and such a date. Next slide, please. So this is just an example of a very short, position letters can be very short pro forma letters, or they can have much more detailed analysis depending on how strongly you feel. Sometimes you just want to be on record as support. Sometimes you really want your specific arguments to be reflected in the bill analysis. Next slide. So this is just kind of showing the pieces of that. So there's a header that tells what the bill is. In this particular case, it was for a bill that was just introduced, so there were no amendments. But later you might say support for SB 90 as amended on October 12th, 2024. And it's got the title of the bill, and the title of the bill you get from LegInfo. That's the formal title. That way, staff knows right away which bill you're talking about. Typically, you have an introduction which talks about your group, what your group is, what they do, why the legislators should care about the group. So often you'll mention that we have such and such a number of supporters. Then you have a body. This is a pro forma letter, so the body is a short paragraph, but that could be much longer. It could be a page or two. You don't want it to be any longer than necessary. You want to have it just long enough to make your key arguments, but you don't want to just go on and on or introduce extraneous ideas. And then you have a closing paragraph that basically reaffirms your support or opposition. So this is kind of the structure of a position letter. And again, these are submitted to the committee through the portal site. Which, again, if you look at the training from last week, Amanda talked about that. Next slide, please. So how do you know what to put in the position letter? There's a lot of ways you can do this. Within your organization, you may have knowledgeable people. You may be a knowledgeable person. You may have a lot of information. It's good, though, to consult with other folks within your organization or with other organizations that you partner with who might have more information that will help you to make persuasive arguments in your position letter. As Kathy was mentioning, the authors, the staff of the legislator who authored the bill will often have fact sheets or sometimes even a template for a position letter that you can take and modify as you need. And then if you can look at bill analysis, if the bill has been to other committees earlier, you can look at the bill analysis from earlier committees. Usually the bill analysis for you, the specific committee that you're going to be addressing is not available until a few days before the bill comes before the committee. But if there's other bill analysis, you can look at that. Next slide. It's important to know your organization's procedure. Each organization has its own procedure, and not everyone is authorized. Definitely do not go out and submit a position letter and say, I'm submitting this on behalf of the Sierra Club, and you don't have the authority to represent that. So you want to know what the procedure is. You want to use the LegInfo site to understand where the bill is, which committees it's already gone to, what the current status is. It's important to check what are the deadlines for the position letters, and we'll see that in just a minute. And then you use the position letter portal to submit that. And again, Amanda covered in the first training session how that site works. Next slide. So this is just an example. If you go to either Senate senate.ca.gov or assembly.ca.gov, and then go to at the top of the menu, there's a list of committees. This happens to be the page for the Senate Transportation Committee. It'll list upcoming hearings, but a couple of important elements. Next slide, please. You can see here they've got, here's the bill hearing date. This was from a few weeks ago. Bill hearing date on January 13th. Their position letter deadline is noon on January 7th. So you want to be sure that you submit your position letter by that deadline. Author amendments is just for the legislator who's authoring the bill to submit their amendments. That's not something you need to worry about. But the position letter deadline, it's important to know that. And it's typically about a week before the hearing, but that varies from committee to committee. So you want to check your specific committee to make sure you know. And then typically there's a statement like this: they don't accept it by email. You have to go through the portal. And if you click on that button, submit position letter, it'll take you to the portal. The first time you have to go through a registration process. After that, it's very quick and easy. And again, Amanda walked through the steps for this in the training last week. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of testimony at the hearing itself, so position letters are submitted in advance. There's different kinds of testimony. Primary testimony is not as common. This is basically a formal statement providing support that's given verbally at the hearing. When a bill comes up for hearing before a committee, the author, the senator or assembly member who authored the bill speaks first. Then there are two supporting witnesses. You're typically limited to 2 minutes, and this is not something you just walk in and do. You're actually invited by the legislator. I happen to give primary testimony for SB 30, for example, but it's not that. It's something that's not so common. Opposing testimony, usually there are some large organizations who have kind of agreed they're going to give the primary opposing testimony. And just like supporting, there are two speakers, limited to 2 minutes each. However, you have to be sure if you're doing opposing testimony that you're first to the mic. Janet and I were at a hearing where some guy who was not one of the major organizations ran up to the mic and started spouting off, and the folks who were all prepared with their 2 minutes opposing testimony were kind of upset. So you have to really be coordinated in advance for this. This is relatively few people. Again, 2 speakers per bill, usually by invitation of the author. On the other hand, next slide, please. What any organization can do is what's called a Me Too. So after the primary witnesses in support or the primary witnesses in opposition have given their testimony, the chair will say, is there anyone else wishing to express support or opposition? And so if you're in support, then you come up to the mic and you are very limited in what you can say. You say your name, the organization you represent, and your position. So Jonathan Cole from representing Climate Action California in support. Or you can sometimes do Me Too's for other organizations. So you could say, Jonathan Cole, representing Climate Action California, and also on behalf of 350 Sacramento and Climate Reality Project, San Fernando Valley. And some people will list 10 or 12 organizations and then say all in support or in opposition. But you're very limited. If you try to get in much more than that, most chairs will cut you off very, very quickly. You used to be able to do these remotely. During COVID. It was possible to do these remotely over Zoom, but now that is no longer allowed. So you have to have somebody in Sacramento. That's one of the reasons that it's useful to be able to give Me Too's for other organizations. If your organization doesn't have anyone who's able to be in the hearing, if you can find somebody who does and is willing to give a Me Too on your behalf, that's a way to get your support registered. Next slide. And that's it for my part. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our volunteer coordinator, Linda Hutchins-Knowles, and she's going to handle the Q&A part of the session.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I think it'll be easiest if we just spotlight all of the people who presented. You guys did a fantastic job. Really, really clear, and I just appreciate so much all that you put into preparing it. So let me get you all spotlighted. Maybe Amanda, you could help with that so I could start the Q&A. I just wanted to say who I am, volunteer coordinator. In this entire organization, only two people are on staff, Amanda, our senior administrator, and myself, and we support all of these amazing volunteers. So I'm going to begin. Some questions were answered in the chat, but I think some of them are worth asking again so it's everybody can hear. But one of the questions in the near the beginning was, how can I find out what bills or issues CAC is following or working on? So I want to take that question.
We had some discussion in the first session. Janet kind of gave an overview, or actually it was Lily, I apologize, gave an overview of some of the key bills that we're working on now. Janet sends out messages periodically to the organization about important bills that are coming up. And Janet, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Well, at the moment, it's quite early. The deadline for introducing bills isn't until about a month from today. So we are far from having an exhaustive list of the bills that we'll want to be following. Probably the best way to keep up with the bills as we figure out what they are and our teams spend a lot of time carefully going over them and deciding what we're going to support is to volunteer and maybe join our Tuesday night meetings. We have general meetings for Climate Action California on the second and fourth Tuesdays every month at 6 o'clock. When we get farther into the year, we will post a list of the major bills that we're following on our website, but it's a little early to do that now. So it's a great question, and sign up with us, and you'll find yourself right in the middle of it all.
Thank you, Jonathan and Janet. So going on to the next question, Mia also asks, do we have to go to Sacramento to have these meetings? Someone want to speak about the rule for folks who can't get to Sacramento? Mary, go for it.
Yeah, you can do a lot just from your desk chair because most of our meetings are done over Zoom. And so you don't have to go to Sacramento. As co-lead for the Capital Team for Natural Resources, I thought I would be getting up to Sacramento a lot, but I haven't. And I am really making a point to meet with legislators and staff in the district. And then I go to a lot of Zoom meetings, and I am planning on going to some things in Sacramento this year. So, but mainly it's over Zoom. And it's really a blast when you finally get to meet people because you kind of develop these friendships. And then we have a party or something, and it's so fun to, you kind of know people and you finally get to meet them in person. It's really enjoyable.
Thank you, Mary. Yes, I want to emphasize that California is such a big state, and so you do not have to be in the capital or near it to be able to participate. We have people from all over the state, in fact, all over the country. We have people on our supporter list. So there's a role for you no matter where you live.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go on to the next one. Axel is asking, what examples can you give when having a good relationship with an assembly member or senator has been impactful for our work? And just because we could talk about that for a very long time, maybe just one short example, and then we'll go on to some more questions. I see Mary would like to take that one. Go for it.
Well, I love Assemblyman Ash Kalra because he is very environmentally proactive. And last year he had a bill, migratory bird bill that passed. And he actually brought it up to us when we were meeting with him in November. And so anyway, everybody, but I mean, that's something we would have maybe thanked him about, and it just came up again in conversation. So I'm hoping that answers the question.
Well, also, last year we sponsored a bill, which means that we thought it up, found an author to carry it, worked to get it passed, and it worked. And the governor signed it. It was AB 368 about passive house. Today, I heard that 2 of our bill ideas are being sent to Ledge Council to turn into actual bills that we can then shop around to legislators who are looking to fill out their dance cards. I think we have a pretty non-trivial effect, mostly based on the fact that we're careful to be very organized and extremely civil and supportive, and legislators are figuring out they need to listen to us. So
Yeah, I would just also, I mentioned SB 30 before. We were pretty closely involved with that when I ended up giving primary testimony. And they actually, when it went to Assembly Transportation, the chair was asking for amendments. They shared with me in advance some of the proposed amendments, asked if we thought those would be okay or not. I mean, it's, we were not successful in keeping the bill from getting watered down, but I think there was some pretty serious consultation.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of influence. Did you want to add something, Kathy? I wasn't sure if you were raising your hand. No. Okay. Okay, moving on. We could really spend a whole evening just on that. So many great relationships. And I want to emphasize that we build relationships with legislators. We're not just transactional and ask them, do something for us. We ask, what are your priorities and how can we support them? So it's a very strong influence because it's so respectful and mutual. So moving on to Melody's question, how do you find out who the backers of the bills are? I think this is, Kathy, when you mentioned, is it sponsored by the Western Petroleum Association or whatever? Could you share, or anybody share, how we find out who the backers are?
Yeah, I can. Most of that information is in the legislative analysis. The people who write the ledge analysis put their list of support and opposition organizations right in that document.
it's also in the fact sheets.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and I should mention one of the advantages is if you submit a position paper, your name will get listed among the supporters or opponents of the bill. If you submit as an individual, they just say, this list of organizations and 25 individuals. So you don't get your individual name, but the organizations are listed.
Great. Another question is, if the assembly representative in their district has a legislative proposal request on their website, is it worthwhile to submit a climate bill, even if that legislator doesn't have a climate action as a priority? So it's kind of a question about people who want to propose bill ideas. Is it worth using that personal request form on their website?
Of course, because one of the things that you're going to be doing, even if you're not successful, is you're going to be calling that legislature's attention to you. And it's true that most of the offices that have there ought to be a law contest or something may only pick one of the proposals that they get, but they want to hear from you, and your bill might get picked. And it's always a good idea, I think, to meet with the representatives who represent you and just talk to them about the climate if that's what you're interested in. They actually care because they want you to vote for them.
Yeah, I want to add that the more people who talk about climate to them, the more they realize that it matters to the public. And there's kind of a narrative right now that it's just only about affordability and maybe not seeing that climate action helps with affordability. So the more we can talk about it, the better. Um, and I want to also just move on to this next question, which is about getting meetings with the right person who knows about the bill. There's some frustration sometimes with talking to a staffer who maybe doesn't know much about that bill. So I just want to say that this was answered live in the chat about how it might be better to talk to the capital staff rather than the district staff. So rather than answering that live, I just want to, or going to more depth, I want to just say it on the record for those who don't see the chat. It was a really good question. Similarly, somebody asked about where did plastic bans area come in and wanted to clarify in the chat. We explained that. Oh, Jonathan, you said it really well, that we have more than just those three policy teams that our capital teams focus on, but we have many other policy teams.
So
So
just a point about talking to the right person. You can always phone the office and ask whoever picks up the phone, who is the staffer who is working on Bill X? And they may say, oh, I don't know what that bill is. So then you have to tell them. But you'll get an answer.
Or you can
And
say, sorry.
yeah.
Or you can say, who is the staffer who is the best person to deal with about transportation?
Right.
Is what I'm usually asking.
Right. Because I think all of the offices assign specific topic areas or committees that they serve on to specific staff. And it's super helpful to ask who that person is. Yeah.
great. So many nuances. Wonderful. And then this is a series of questions, so I'm just going to post two at a time so we don't forget what they are. But one question is, do we have to register as lobbyists? What's the criteria for that?
I think you have to be paid a certain amount a year, and it's not a low number to have to register as a lobbyist. Climate Action California does not have any registered lobbyists, although it's possible that one of our volunteers or more could register as a lobbyist, and maybe that would give them a little bit more cachet with other lobbyists, but it's certainly not required. And I think the requirement is based on rate of pay.
And it's one of our strengths is because they know that we are not paid. We don't have an ulterior motive. We're doing this because we deeply believe in this mission. So it's a very powerful voice. And then some other questions from the same person. How do you find out who's giving money to the legislators and how much? So yeah, just a question about that political influence. We already had a question about how do you find out who the backers or opposers of bills are, but how do we find out who's giving money to the legislators? I think that's what the question was, Jeffrey. If I'm wrong, please clarify that in the chat.
Well, there's Open Secrets, which is a website that tells you who is contributing to whom. And there, if you search around, I can never remember actually the name of the page, but I've found it a million times on the Secretary of State's website. You can figure out both individuals who are contributing to campaigns and also PACs and corporations that are making contributions. It's all public except for contributions to certain PACs, which don't have to be disclosed, which is a problem.
Indeed. Thank you. And then the final questions related to this topic is just confirming that we never record the Zoom lobbying meetings or use Zoom AI companion. And what are the factors that would determine the influence of an individual position letter? So I guess two separate questions. We don't, yeah, I can just say we know we don't record the meetings with legislators and we boot out any AI companions very vigorously. And then yeah, factors that determine the influence of your position letter. I think that's questions about how do you know how much influence your individual position letter will have?
Yeah, that's hard to gauge in advance, but you can get some sense of it through conversations with committee staff, conversations with staff for the authors, conversations with the authors themselves, and you can get some sense of what arguments might be most persuasive. But you can never tell for sure. But the more you talk to committee staff, to the staff for the legislators, to key legislators themselves, especially if you can talk to the chair, those are all things that increase the chance of your being able to frame the letter in a way that's going to be influential.
And the way to tell whether that has worked is to look at the bill analysis. So every time a committee hears a bill, they publish a document which sometimes looks like a master's thesis and a half about that bill that lists all the pros and cons and arguments for and against, and the supporting organizations and opposing organizations. So, as I think we've said, there are really two reasons to write a letter supporting or opposing a bill. One is to get your name into the bill analysis, and the second is to make an argument that perhaps nobody else is making, that you want to influence the consultant who is writing the bill analysis. And there have been times when, they picked out a whole paragraph from one of our letters and dropped it into the bill analysis. There were some bills last year where Senator Josh Becker actually read our letter into the record at the end of the hearing as his closing remarks on SB 540. But it's worth putting some time and effort into your letter if you think you've got an argument that might sway the committee staff, because that bill analysis is very influential. And the bill analysis also includes recommendations for amendments, phrased like this: the committee may wish to change this to that. Well, what that really means is the committee insists that you, author, do this, because that's just the way the process works in the committee. So it's definitely worth, if you think you have a substantive argument, make it in a letter before the deadline to the committee staff.
And you can find the bill analysis on Ledge Info. If you go to the bill and Ledge Info, there's a bill analysis tab, and it will show the analysis for every committee for which an analysis has been written, and also for the floor votes.
Right.
All right.
And there is, in the part one of these trainings, there's a section on how to use Ledge Info and where to find that information.
All right, we're coming down to the final questions here, and I know that sometimes people drop off before the very end, so I just want to point out the slide that we're looking at. If you'd like to volunteer with us, please scan that code, or we'll drop the link in the chat, and I'll reach out to you to set up a meeting to introduce you to Climate Action California. And I don't know if you want me to mention about donating, Janet, or if you'd like to.
Well, we can all mention it.
Yeah.
We need everything you can give us. And if you don't have time to volunteer, it would be great if you have the ability to contribute. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. So the final few questions here, Elena's asking kind of a technical question. Could you explain the provision that allows legislators to change their vote after the vote if it does not change the results of the vote? When legislature does this, how can we see the actual voting record? Because she serves on a committee that looks like the voting record only shows the vote after the vote has been changed. So in other words, a legislator could vote no on a bill, then it passes and they change their vote to yes.
Well, the best way to do that, unfortunately, is to be watching the session on your phone or your laptop and take a screenshot when they flash the tally right after the first vote. And it is really interesting to see what changes. You know, if you get there are lots of groups of lobbyists and others that are on some social media. There's usually somebody who has taken a picture of that screen at the end of the vote. But there really isn't. I don't think there's any more formal way of doing that, because up until they close the roll on that vote, anybody can change how they're
And you
registered.
can't, yeah, there are recordings. So if you don't happen to catch it in the instant, you
That's
can
right.
go back and look at the recording. But you
Right.
have to kind of go through the whole session to see if you can find the spots where the votes or tallies are shown.
Great.
A
And
fun
then,
question.
yeah. So the last question, I'm not sure if we're familiar with this, but Jeffrey's found the webinars by the Aspen Policy Institute on influencing our government to be useful, though they don't teach lobbying. Do you have any opinion about that organization or that training?
Did you say that again?
Yeah, the Aspen Policy Institute has the free webinars on influencing our government. Jeffrey's found them to be helpful. And do any of you have other opinions? Have you seen them or have a thought about that? No worries if not.
I haven't seen it, but it can't hurt.
Yeah. We're fairly California specific, but I expect there are principles that would apply at the state level as well as federal.
And the last question here from Elaine is just like, why are they allowed to do this? The changing their vote, and it seems dishonest. She's reflecting my own opinion. I think that's very, very not fair. But anybody have any idea why they're allowed to do that?
I mean, the vote is held open until it's closed, and while it's open, anybody can change. I don't know the reason behind that tradition, but we had it might have even been SB 30. There was some bill we were looking at where the vote was getting very close to the majority, and then people started dropping off and changing their votes to no, because there was a member who was circulating rumors that were not true. And so the author can request. The author said, "I'd like us to hold the vote until later." At a lunch break for caucuses where they caucus with their party, they quashed the rumor. Bill came back and it went through. So yeah, it can be very strange.
Wow.
Well, those are the main questions from the chat. And I wonder if any of the presenters wanted to add any final thoughts. And again, just, yeah, it was super, super wonderful.
Well, okay, I'll add one final thought. One of the big benefits to me for doing this is that I'm getting to exercise my rights as a citizen in a democracy. And I get to speak up. And so I am. And I'm just so happy to have found Climate Action California with the support to do that and the know-how.
Yeah, I want to add that to when Kathy was describing the meetings and how we facilitate them, the best training to get in how to run a good meeting is to come to those meetings. You'll watch Kathy and others in action do such a lovely job. But the more you come, the more you'll kind of internalize how we do it. And it's just a great way to learn. And you don't have to speak. You can just be there and listen and show support that way. So yeah, I appreciate that very much, Mary. And I think my experience has been that when you work as a group on a policy pushed together on a campaign, it's very much more effective than individuals chiming in individually. We have much more power as this organization. And so the more of you that can join, the more power we'll have. So I do hope you'll reach out to sign and volunteer. You don't have to sign a contract. You only give as much time as you have, and you'll learn a lot and have a great community.
And not least, it's actually fun.
Yes.
Because my feeling is, if you're going to do this hard work, and it's not fun, you're not going to stick.
Amen.
But we have a lot of people who really do stick. And we're all nice people, and it's interesting and it's fun. So hang out with us.